So, welcome back after a short break. Hope you refreshed yourself and you're ready for our next talk from Sjoera about inclusive digital design.
First, you have to give the mic for the presentation. Alright, I hope this works because I'm talking about accessibility, so I want to be accessible.
Oh,
and I have captions. So I think I have to speak loud enough because this needs the microphone of my computer, so let's hope this works throughout my whole presentation. First of all, thank you all for coming. It's nice that you're here, even though it's nice to be outside right now. And also thanks to UX Antwerp for having me. It's always nice to be able to talk about what I'm passionate about. A little bit about me. So my name is Sjoera. I've been a UX designer since 2012. But actually I graduated as a translator, so I accidentally rolled into UX design and I liked it there, so I stayed. And currently I'm at the LAN, at the mobile app team. And accessibility is a very important topic at the LAN because a lot of our travelers, they rely solely on public transport to go anywhere, because when you're blind, for example, you can't just drive a car, you can ride a bike if you have mobility issues. So our app needs to be accessible, because if it's not, then you're kind of stranded. So what I want to talk about today is what is inclusive design and accessibility, why is it important, and what are the responsibilities of the UX designer in all of this. And of course, how can designers and developers collaborate to make an inclusive digital world? So without further ado, let's dive in. So I mentioned both accessibility and inclusive design. And while they are closely related, they are not the same, because accessibility is an attribute. So a website or an app is accessible or it's not, and inclusive design is a method. And while practicing inclusive design doesn't necessarily make your website or app accessible, it is a way of looking at accessibility because it's part of inclusive design, but it's not like a specific method to comply with accessibility rules like the Web Accessibility Guidelines, or CAG. I will come back to that later. And in a perfect world, accessibility and inclusive design collaborate, work together to make truly accessible and inclusive interface for everyone. So this is the inclusive design toolkit of Microsoft. And as you can see here, you have permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities. And when we think about disability, we typically think of the first category only. So people are blind or deaf, or they have only one arm. But it's more than that. It can also be temporary or situational, and that can mean all of us, because everybody can break an arm, everybody can stand outside in the sun and have a bright screen, and then the contrast is low, or you have a bartender who doesn't hear what the customer is saying because it's so loud. So if you practice inclusive design, it means you take into account all the other types of disability as well. And inclusive design also is broader than accessibility, because accessibility focuses on people with disabilities, while inclusive design also focuses on gender, language, ethnicity. For example, I'm left-handed. I don't consider this a disability.
Woo!
But inclusive design would mean that the interface is usable both left-handed and right-handed. And it also means that it's inclusive for these people, because if you lost your right arm, you can only use your left one, then if the interface is usable for left-handed people, then we also help them. Why is inclusive design important? Well, I guess we all know that in today's society, a lot of things are becoming fully digital. Like It's Me, everybody knows this, I think. We all remember the COVID app, where you had to get your certificate and you had to register with It's Me. It was very difficult for some people because they didn't have access to It's Me, or it didn't work or whatever. or you can fill out your taxes online. You can also do it on paper, but if you do it online, it's already pre-filled, so it's a lot easier than filling out those papers. And there's of course online banking. A lot of bank offices are closing down their offices. Their service hours are also reduced, so you're pretty much relying on doing the online banking now. You can still go to the office, but it's always decreasing. So yeah, I'm showing some examples here because if you exclude people, if you don't make your product accessible, then you're just excluding them from society. Also for online shopping, and more specifically buying tickets for concerts or events. Has anybody bought a paper ticket in the last year? Raise your hands. Ah, one person, okay. But it's very rare. I mean, I come from the time where I went to the record store to buy concert tickets. So people here are young enough, record store, that's where you can buy CDs. But it's not a, yeah. But that's not a thing anymore. You always buy tickets online. So imagine if the platform is not accessible and you can't use it, then you have to rely on others to buy the ticket for you or be excluded from the event. Something much more important is healthcare. If you see these kiosks, I was at a hospital and I thought, oh, this is very handy. I don't have to stand in line. I can just check in by entering my EID and then just check in and I'm done. But there was another lady who had a very different experience. It was an elderly lady. She was having so much trouble with the touch screen. She didn't understand what she had to do. And she said, like, oh, everything is with computers these days and I feel so left out. And that made me sad because it is, imagine if you're coming there and you can't check in on this device because, well, this elderly lady, she wasn't really confident using this, but what if you're deaf? What if you're blind? What if you're blind, then you can't use it. There's no audio feedback on this device. So it's really important that these kind of stuff is taken into account. And then lastly, the sector I'm currently working in, the public transportation. Everything is moving more to the digital side now, also at the LAN. So you can buy your tickets online in the app, or you can look at the time schedules, and it's still available offline as well, but I'm noticing that there is an ever ongoing digital shift, and I can imagine that in the end the paper tickets will disappear just like concert tickets, and you will have to rely on the app to buy your tickets. So if we exclude people who cannot use an app, if we don't take into account accessibility, then you're also excluding them from public transport. But it's not all bad. It's also an opportunity to create a more inclusive world. For example, in the LAN app, you can use voiceover if you're blind to listen to the timetables or when your bus is coming. So you can listen here, my bus is at the stop right now, the number 6, or number 89 will arrive in 6 minutes. And before, if you were blind, you had to ask someone else. Or if you wanted to get off, now in the app you can set an alert and you can just listen to your phone telling you have to get off at the next stop. Before they had to ask the driver, and I talked to blind people who said sometimes the driver forgets to warn me and then I don't know where I am. This is truly a disaster. So it's a good thing that we can also do things to make the world more accessible by making it more digital. And if you're not a decent human being and you don't care, then there's also the European Accessibility Act that will make it mandatory to make your product accessible. So it's to ensure equal access to digital products and services throughout Europe. And it's not just websites and apps, but also like these terminals that I showed you at the hospital, that will also become mandatory that they're accessible. And non-compliance can lead to fines. So that always works, get people in their wallets. To prepare to this European Act, you can see if your website or app is compliant with the web accessibility guidelines. That means it has to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means like taking into account color blindness, making sure that the contrast is well enough. Operable means that everything should be keyboard accessible if you're not able to use a mouse, for example, or so that you can use other means of navigating, or to make touch screens, touch targets large enough, which is not only usable for people with motor disabilities, but also for anybody with fingers, basically. Make it understandable. So that you use clear language, that you use different languages, and also that you add like help text and clear error text so that it's understandable for everyone. And last, to make the interface robust. So it means that it's compliant with assistive technologies, both today and in the future. And there are 3 levels of compliancy: A, AA, and AAA. And I'm not going to go into all the details because it's very extensive, but if you're interested in how can I make my product more accessible, then look into the WCAG principles. Now, what is our role as UX designers? So, of course, we have the obvious things, and if I say obvious, I mean, if you're a designer, then you've probably seen these as being the basic UX guidelines, such as color. So that means only use colors, or use colors that are usable for people who are colorblind. Take a look at your contrast, so that there is enough contrast between foreground and background color. Look at your touch target size. Like I said, don't make them too small so that they're usable for everybody. And font size, make sure that all your fonts are large enough so that people can read everything. So those are like the obvious things, but you also have the less obvious things, which I will go to later, because first I'm going to show you an example of use of color. And again, if you're a designer, you've probably already seen this. So this is an example where there's an error. So, and we outline the field where there's an error with red. You have to know that 1 in 12 males and 1 in 200 females have some form of color deficiency, which is a lot. It's a big percentage of people. And most of them are having trouble with red and green, like seeing the difference between red and green. So they will see this. So they don't know what's going on, like I can't submit, but why? So the better thing to do would be to also use icons, so check marks if it's okay, then a red cross if it's not okay, and then also add an error message, please enter a valid email. And then you will see this, which is, now you know what's going on. And this is also more clear for anyone. I can see color, but this example is a lot more easier to understand than the previous one. So accessibility, if you make your product accessible, it's not just for this small niche of people, it's really for everyone. Also for contrast ratio, just use a contrast ratio checker like Web AIM to see, okay, so we have the WCAG guidelines, I'm using blue as a foreground color, white as a background color, this passes, so this is good. Just a basic check here. And then we also have the less obvious things, like design patterns for neurodiversity. And those are often overlooked, because you have people with autism, where we need to use clear language, like no figure of speech, or no idioms. People with ADHD are easier distracted, so we need to make sure that there are no distractions in the interface, that it's not cluttered. And people with dyslexia, let's support them by using images to support the text, by using a legible font. And again, while I'm mentioning these things, you're probably thinking, oh, I would also like these things, even though I don't have autism or ADHD or dyslexia. So again, taking care of these things is good for everybody. Here's, for example, this is a very cluttered interface on the left, and on the right it's very clean. The left one, if you have ADHD, it gives you so much choice paralysis and makes you stressed, and then it will make you leave. But also if you don't have ADHD, this looks terrible. On the right side, it looks a lot cleaner. It makes it easier to use, and it makes you want to use this page and read this page. Now we've covered all the visual stuff, and then we're done. No, it's not, because inclusive design is not only the visual aspect, it's also in the code. So yeah, that's where it often goes wrong. And at the LAN, I'm lucky enough to work with a development team that takes accessibility into account when they're coding. But it's not their job basically, it's the UX designer's job because it's part of the user experience. So the question is how do we do this? How do we make sure that we're not just going to throw the designs over the wall and hope for the best? That's not how we should do it. Because inclusive design also means alt text. So that means adding alternative text to any images that you use on your website, so that if you're blind and you use a screen reader, that you know what's on the image. Also make sure that your interface is keyboard accessible, provide screen reader support, and text resizing support. So this means that if you use the text resizing of your operating system or of the browser, that the interface doesn't break. So an example of alt text. On the left side you see, okay, we have an image of a cat, and the image name is IMG584 blah blah blah. And if you use a screen reader and there's no alt text, then that is what you will hear, and that's pretty useless. So if you provide an alt text like gray striped cat on a green background front view, if you're using a screen reader, then at least you know what the content is that is on the screen. So this should be a deliverable as a UX designer when you're delivering your designs to development, that you provide the alt text as well, that they don't have to come up with it. You just tell them, okay, this is the alt text for that image, and then for example, if this is HTML, but it goes for any code that they use, then they can add it as an alt text here in the HTML, and then it will be usable for anyone using a screen reader. You don't have to do this for every image, by the way. It's only if the image adds content. So if it's just an illustration to make it pretty, then you don't have to add this alt text, because it will just distract your user for no reason. About keyboard accessibility, so you need to make sure that all content can be accessed with the keyboard alone. So there are people who cannot use a mouse because they have tremor, or they have limited muscle control, or other motor disabilities that makes them unable to use a mouse, so they use a keyboard to navigate. But also if you use a screen reader, most people on desktop then use the keyboard. Not necessarily, but most do. It's important that you only make elements that are interactive, focusable, because if not, it will just confuse them. Okay, I can put focus on this element, but it doesn't do anything, so make sure you don't do that. And the navigation order must be logical and intuitive. And that means, well, for Western languages, left, right, top, down. So for a website, for example, that would be from the navigation to the content and then down to the footer. So here's an example from Netflix. So this could be a deliverable to the development team, where I've marked all the focusable elements for the screen reader with squares. So the navigation, and then the buttons, and then the refresh button. So you see this is not focusable because it's not actionable, it's just some information. And then we also have the navigation order. Mostly it's straightforward, but to avoid any confusion, it's always nice to also add that to your deliverables. So here you see we navigate from the top to the search, the alerts profile, and then to this button, and then to the refresh, and then to the title here, like this. For screen reader support, it's also important that you add correct labels, and this means that you name your elements correctly. So if you're using a screen reader, you know what it is and what it does. Like if it's an H1, an H2, like a heading, a paragraph, if it's a button, if it's a link. You can also add a hint text, and I will give you an example of that later on. So that can be useful to just give an extra clue to the user what they can do with the element that is currently focused. Very important thing that's often overlooked is a loading state. So if you can see, you're looking at your screen, there's a spinner, there's a process bar, I don't know, something is moving. So I know something is going on and I wait. If you are blind and you use a screen reader, you hear nothing. You don't know what's going on. So if there's a loading state, make sure that the screen reader says something like, image is loading, or your emails are being synced, I don't know, anything. And the same goes for success or failure feedback. So this little pop-up that says your email has been sent successfully, make sure that this is read out without the user having to specifically focus on this element. Again, to give clear user feedback that something has succeeded or failed. Another example from Netflix. So you have here the H2, which is also visible there in the code, and you see that it's also a link. So, so you see that the names are in the code here. And why this is important? This gives structure to the page if you're using a screen reader. So you have to imagine you can't see this. We see that okay, there's a navigation, there's a title, there's another title, and we know it's a title because we can see it. But if you can't see it, you need to know that this is a heading. So if it's named correctly as an H2, then the screen reader will say this is a heading. And then here this can also be a deliverable where you just mark, okay, this should be a link, 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 that's a button or a button, this is both an H2 and a link. So if you just add this to your deliverables to development team, that it will help them to correctly implement the accessibility cues for the screen reader. And now I hope my sound works because I will show you an example from Netflix.
Link. Afspelen. Aanbevolen content. Region. Meer informatie.
Button. Group. You are currently on a button. Group. To click this button, press Control, Option Space. Visited. Link.
Mijn lijst alles verkennen.
Main. You are currently on a heading level 2. Link.
De 8 shop.
You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control, Option Space. Link.
Erik.
You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control, Option Space. Link, 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 link. Mailtitels weergeven. Button. Group. You are currently on a button. Group. To click.
So there's some room for improvement.
Yes. Well, they do it pretty well. And by the way, if you're wondering, does a blind person use Netflix? Yes, they do, because Netflix actually offers content with descriptions. So they just describe the story, like there's a woman walking down the beach and she's carrying a red handbag, and so that you can actually listen to the story as it's being told. And then the last thing I want to mention is text resizing support. Well, I went to Grasshop Metal meeting last weekend, and of course I wanted to check if their app was accessible, and it wasn't for many reasons. But this one I want to use as an example for text resizing. So as you see here, if I put my OS's font size maximum, then you can't see when is this band playing. It's cut off. So this is not what you want. Your layout should not break if you increase the font size. And this is a good example. So Duolingo does it really well. So you see here, this is maximum font size. Everything is still very readable, very usable. And of course, it will always look funny because you only have so much screen space, and it's not the most beautiful interface, but at least it shouldn't break. If you choose to use this font size because, well, you can't see that well, and you need to see it this big to be able to read it, then it should still be a usable app. So what helps is to add a few examples in the biggest screen size to your deliverables, so that the development team has some kind of guideline to know, okay, this is how these elements should scale and this is how they should behave. Now I'm going to give you an example how I deliver my accessibility specs to the development team at the LAN. So we use, well, I don't because I don't code, they use a React Native at the LAN, and so yeah, they have some accessibility specs here, like accessible is true, accessibility label, and of course this will be different for other code languages, but the principles are applicable to other languages as well. So the first thing I do is define what are the accessible elements. Well, this map, I say accessible is false, because if you are blind and you're using a screen reader, this is just useless information for you. You're just listening to, there is a map. Well, thank you for nothing. So this is false. So if you cannot focus on this when you're using a screen reader. And then what you can also do is make an entire block focusable. So that's what I did here, is say, okay, this whole header is one element. So don't read out all these separate things. Don't say 846, 936. And I will show you later how this will sound if you consider the entire block as a focusable element. And next is I define the content order. So how do you scroll through the content, how does the focus move. And here in this example, it's pretty straightforward. It's just top to bottom. And if it's this obvious, I usually don't document it. Only if it's a specific order that's not, well, not really straightforward, then I do document it, but in this case, I would just skip it. And then 3, define the roles. So I already showed you this example of buttons and links. So you can also do this for React Native. You can say this is an input field, and then the screen reader will say this is an input field, and then you know that you can enter something here, and then those are buttons, so you know you can click on them and something will happen. And then step 4 is define the announced contents. Why is this important? Well, here it's pretty obvious. So departure tomorrow at 9, and then tap to change date and time. That's what I told about adding some extra in text. So to help your user, this is what you can do if you tap it. We have earlier routes, and this one. So because we have the whole block, we are not saying 9:04, 10:01, 75 minutes. This doesn't make sense. We can use our eyes, we can see the structure of this block. We know what these elements mean compared to each other, but if you can't see it, then just naming all of these elements separately doesn't make sense. So what we do want is route with departure at 9:04 and arrival at 10:01, duration 57 minutes with 1 transfer. For this route, you have to walk for 9 minutes. You will take bus 290 and bus 30. Tap for more details on this route. So this kind of specs, it's important to define them, because if you don't, well, it's not the developer's job to make this stuff up. They can, of course, but it's not their job. We are UX designers. We are supposed to make the product usable. So in my opinion, this is part of our job to define what does the user hear when they use a screen reader. And this is then the end result. So this is an example of a spec sheet that I always send when I deliver, that I give to the developers when I give them my designs. And there's also a spec sheet for the screen reader with all the accessibility specs. And all of this combined will be
Selected. Earlier routes. Button. Click to show earlier journeys. Route departing at 9:04 Wednesday the 19th of June and arriving at 9:55. Duration 51 minutes with 2 transfers. For this route you have to walk for 12 minutes. You will take the bus 290, tram 2 and tram 7 for this route. Button. Tap for more details on this route.
So my key takeaways are that the inclusive design, it doesn't end with the visual part. There's also a large part of it in the code. So what we need to do as designers is to learn where and what the accessibility specifics are in the code, and therefore we just need to sit down with our development team and really collaborate and look where can we do this together. And then of course add the specs to your deliverables or handoff, so that we can build truly inclusive and accessible products together.
And you just leave it. It's okay. I think we can just do it that way, yeah?
Okay, yeah, we can. Yeah.
I think it's fine. Thanks a lot for this really, really interesting talk. I got brainwashed about accessibility, and still I learned new things today, so I'm very happy about that. Are there any questions in the audience? Saskia.
Yeah, I really love that you shared that handoff bit. That's really interesting, and it's really important to brief the developers properly. One thing I have to ask about step 4: how do people know where to tap? How does that work? So it says like tap for more info. Where do they tap? So it's more
They
like
just
a
tap
new
the screen.
question.
So
anywhere.
So
Okay.
if the focus is on an element, they don't see it, of course. It can just tap the screen. It doesn't matter where. They can
Okay.
just tap it anywhere. Yeah. Yeah, try that.
I should.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're using any specific apps for your deliverables, or if you do it all by hand.
Figma.
Because I know there are like some apps or plugins like Stark and things like that. You don't use
okay, you mean for testing stuff. Yeah, so I use Start exactly for...
No, for like accessibility annotations for delivery, for that thing.
For the annotations, I just do it in Figma, because yeah, have all my designs in Figma. I just make a separate page called accessibility. I paste everything in it, and then I just add a layer with the specs. So I don't use any specific tools right now.
Okay, because I was wondering, because I do use like the StarCap for that, so maybe.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know you could make annotations.
Yeah, like there are apps, but none of the apps that I know have the function to do like what you showed with Netflix, so that they mark all of the clickable elements, which I thought would be very useful. That's why I'm asking if you use any apps.
Yeah,
for that.
no, just
Alright.
yeah.
By hand to this.
Yeah.
There's probably a Figma plugin that does that. That's my general rule. Is like there's probably a Figma
I
plugin
haven't
that
found
does that.
one.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, just write it yourself. Or ask your
Challenge
friends, developers.
Yeah, we have a few members that create Figma plugins.
Yes.
I actually had a question as well. So when you showed like the order of focus, you showed it on a few different, one on the app, one on the web. Most of them were just F patterns. Is F pattern the basic standard, universal standard, and sometimes you like deviate, or is it really a Wild West kind of deal?
No, F patterns, yeah.
F patterns,
it's just
yeah, okay.
left, right. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Is a tab index still sequential? Like for the Netflix, it goes title, show, title. Is there any kind of way to say there's a section with this title? Do you want to see the details or go to the next section?
I think if you mark it as a header, I don't know the exact key combination, but you can jump between headers if you mark them correctly.
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah,
if you
same.
jump to each page and you have start logo, navigation, search. That's
No,
really
you can jump between headers, but I'm not a user myself, so I don't know all the shortcuts that you can. Yeah. Yes?
I actually wonder how knowledgeable must be visually impaired person in order to use this web reader. Like, how much does he need to know, for instance, what is carousel, what is like accordion, and so that and how the name is aligned to this level of knowledge.
It's definitely a learning process, but I've done user testing with blind users, and it's incredible. And they go so fast, they almost don't listen to it. Like, and then, okay. Yes, I don't need that. It's I don't know. It's an acquired skill, I guess, but yeah, they're pretty good at using it. Yeah. Yes.
How long do you think we should be supporting offline or non-digital mediums for like teaching or anything?
How long?
At least 2 more generations.
Yeah, I think it's our generation. I think we are, and I was born in '87. I think we are the first generation that really grew up with technology. So I think every generation that came before us, they still are very.
yes, but even
4 in 10 people in Flanders are digitally vulnerable. So that's 40% you lose when you say it's purely digital.
Yeah.
So I think it's by forever. The 7%
A lot longer
of
than
population will not use a computer.
Yeah.
So that's still a lot.
I think it's not just a generational.
Oh no, I know people my age who like are absolutely
Yeah, so my
digitally not
grandfather is
capable.
82 and he uses everything on his computer.
Yeah.
But I think that's also a bit true if you look at like Europe or North America or something, but if you look at other places in the world, I think it will take a bit longer until they have the same access to internet, to computers, to mobile phones and so on. Of course not everywhere, but it's not everywhere the same.
Yeah, of course I'm not saying that everything should be digital, but if we could at least make the things that are digital accessible, then I think that can already go a long way. But I'm not a fan of throwing all the paper cards at the land overboard right away, because we will have a lot of people freaking out. And
It's interesting. I took that your introduction with the machines at the hospital. I took my kid to the hospital the other day. He didn't bring his identity card.
the people who were behind the desk didn't want to put in the name because they said, yeah, we make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
So what are you supposed to do then? You know, it's like the machine is like the solution for everything, and kids think their phone is the solution for everything. There's like no in between. You know, the identity card doesn't.
Soon you will have your identity card on the phone. That's the solution.
Yeah, that's coming soon. That's the next step. The government's working on that.
What if you left your phone at
I actually would never let use the phone anywhere. I actually left my phone at home. I forgot my phone. Okay,
I have one final question, and this is asking for a friend, and not definitely a meetup group that organizes UX events every month. What's the translation service you just flawlessly plugged into your?
It's just Google Slides.
Impressive, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, from now on, mandatory Google Slides on UX Beers events. EB1.
Yeah.
It was really well done.
Yeah, it's really well done.
Good job.
Yeah.
For when the computers take over, you never know.
Well, you still need to speak though. So. No, but thanks a lot. It was super interesting. I would say let's head to the kitchen for some further discussions.
Okay, cool.
The next UX beer will be August 27th, I think. We're still looking for a host, so I hope we'll find it. But now we all go on a well-deserved summer break, I would say. Let's keep in touch on Slack if you miss us too much. Thank you for coming.
Goed gedaan.
Dankjewel. Is hij bezig was van de
Wat? Ah ja, de speakerpatches.
Die zijn er nieuwe, Sjoera. Je hebt nog geen nieuwe, hè? Je hebt nog een oude, hè?
Ik wou nog iets zeggen tijdens mijn intro, ik ben het vergeten. Ik wou nog zeggen, de eerste keer dat ik gewoon een talk heb gegeven was op UX Beers.
Ah ja.
Jij hebt hem. Ten eerste, wanneer is het bij AIO? Want ik hoorde van Brianne dat wij al wel geboekt hadden bij AIO, dat we daar
Ja, dus ik had net berichtje gekregen van Ellen, ik zeg Ellen. Dus Nina was op vakantie, ja. Dus ik zal u eigenlijk...
Ja, inderdaad. Wij doen ook, wij hosten ook de UX Beers.
Ja, dat klopt, ja. Ja, het was eigenlijk inderdaad zoals Peter al zei, we waren nog op zoek naar host voor nu voor augustus en voor oktober. En ja, inderdaad, ik had dus gevraagd aan het dus nu met hulp van of we eens konden kijken van, kunnen we het op een datum...
Ja, dan zeiden we gaan dat wel doen, misschien eerder in oktober.
Ja, dus daar hebben we momenteel nog een slot voor vrij, dus we kunnen zelfs eens met Babo horen. Dus,
ja, maar ik denk dat Diana het wel opgelost heeft. Omdat Babo het vroeg, dacht aan, dan is het waarschijnlijk niet echt.
Ah ja, nee, we zijn ermee bezig, maar het is alleszins heel erg bedankt.
Of dat we nog iemand hebben die iets kan vertellen.
Dat zal wel goed komen, zeker. Ja. Waar mogen wij over lastigvallen?
Ja, ik kwam maar in, maar ik word naar hier gestuurd.
Ah ja.
Ik wou graag volunteer worden bij jullie.
Ah, oké. Voilà, dus aangenaam. Dus ik ben Simon eigenlijk en om u het een beetje uit te leggen, Bavo en Annie die zijn een beetje aan het opbouwen eigenlijk in de organisatie.
Ik heb het gehoord.
Ja, inderdaad. Nee, en dus eigenlijk, we zijn nu in een situatie eigenlijk waar dat we kijken voor mensen die met ambitie zitten om verder deze UX-talks te hosten, te doen. En
Heb je iets van contactgegevens van mij nodig, dat we dat eens een keer kunnen bespreken of zo?
Ja, als je mij je e-mail geeft, dan kunnen ze een call houden.
Ja,
dus,
heb je een gsm of zo, of papier?
Ik heb wel een gsm, ja. Wacht hè, schrijf anders.
Ik zal e-mail en nummer geven, dat is misschien makkelijk.
Ja, ik ga misschien ook al even stoppen met de streaming, dan is dat ook